Hi, good afternoon and good evening. This is Jim Gerson from CareStack. You're in the right place for maximizing your bottom line spend management in a dental practice. Jim Gochis, we're calling each other our full names because we're both Jim G. Jim Gochis, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give an introduction, your backgrounds.
All righty. Thank you, Jim and Dan. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Just want to let you know a little bit about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from in this presentation about spend management in a dental practice. My name's Jim Gochis, and I've been in procurement for pretty much my entire career, and I've worked in all types of companies. I've worked in nonprofit, for-profit, public companies, and private. And I started off my career getting my teeth cut on some large Fortune 500 companies in the insurance industry and educational institutions. I'm from New York, so you might tell I have one of those funny accents, and I worked in New York City for years. And then I started to get into healthcare, and that was about 20 years ago. And my first foray into healthcare was in the medical world. So I really jumped in deep into geriatric care, skilled nursing, acute care trauma centers. And I worked for HCA, Healthcare Corporation of America, which is one of the largest out there, and oversaw procurement operations in hospitals. So in doing so, I started to learn more and more about the real life scenarios in hospitals that transcend very similarly to the behaviors in dental practices. And that is around the supplies, and primarily the supplies in a unit. So you have a unit on a hospital floor, or you have a supply closet in a dental practice. Clinicians operate very similarly in working to effect appropriate spend management, efficiencies, and how those supplies that are used are associated with the patient and the caseload. So in doing all of that, I've learned quite a bit. From there, I moved into the dental space, from the medical space to the dental space, and I did that for about, I'm doing that for about 6 years now. So I feel that I have a very well-rounded view of working with clinicians very closely, CFOs, business operations people, doctors, dentists, all sorts of clinical and operational business staff. Let's talk a little bit about the purpose of this presentation. The concept of spend management. So we have a lot of different definitions out there. So I just tried to bring it a little bit more granular and down to earth. And what spend management really is about making prudent business decisions in a dental practice. For purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on dental practices. And that is about sourcing decisions that bring us to the right product, the cost-effective solutions, and arriving at efficiencies. So all of those things are kind of married together. And this is what we're talking about with the definition of spend management. Spend management in a dental practice specifically comprises pretty much the grouping of dental supplies and equipment, property leases, lab fees, insurance fees, things that make up the bulk of recurring expenses. And then you have some more ancillary things. You might even have a standalone facility that has, landscaping and so forth. So then it trickles down from there. When we talk about controlling this is a lot to control. And so what I've learned in my discussions with dentists and folks in seminars, whether they're just getting out of school or they're long tenured dentists, is that the primary goal is for quality of patient care. So it gets hard to control these spend management protocols and processes that everybody really wants to embrace. People really generally understand them. And some of the things that I'll talk about here are validating. Some of them you may even be implementing, and some things I'll talk about where there are resources out there to help dental practices effect these processes and protocols. But it becomes difficult when everybody in a dental practice is humming along, working to take care of a patient, and then they need to worry about the right product at the right time, in the right spot, at the right inventory level, and so forth. So some of these things I'm going to talk about really are around solutions that can be implemented in the practice, and they're purposefully generalized so they can apply really to any dental practice. So let's talk a little bit about industry benchmarks out there. So you can look around, you can Google, and you can see what, you know, the different leading indexes report as to what is a healthy benchmark. And then some of the sites out there actually report where you're in the, you know, danger mode. I call it danger Will Robinson. If you're of a certain age, you remember that old TV show. But when you talk about supplies, I broke it out a little bit here to give some perspective of where we want to be. And so for supplies, you know, you say 5%, and that's a percent of your overhead. So a percent of your revenue. That adds up to your total expenses. You want to be 57 to 61.5%, you know, in that sweet spot. There are always practices that are, you know, really good at spend management who can get even better than that. So 5% on supplies, that's considered to be in good shape. That's where, you know, you really want to aspire to be. 6% is where you start to see an opportunity for improvement, and indicators start to appear when you start to look at your spend management, what your benchmark is and why you're at 6%. 7 and above, you're really in the danger mode. Now, I know that in some of the dental practices that I've worked with, they actually are in, you know, in supplies only, between 8 and 13%. And sometimes—
Wow. Okay,
yeah,
that's significant.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they actually think it's fine and it's good, and it's kind of you know, an epiphany when they're educated and it's explained. Really, it explains itself when you start to dig into the data of the operations of a dental practice. And I'm going to talk about some of these challenges that contribute to high percent, and some of the things that are great tools and guidance to bring those percentages down. So labs, same mindset. Labs, if you're between 6 and 8%, you're in good shape. That's your desired target range. Labs I've seen go 13 and higher. And, you know, some dental practice leaders will say, well, if I'm at 10%, I'm feeling comfortable. Really, you know, it's how you want to run your practice. And in some cases, a clinician will say, well, I have very high-end clients. I'm in a geography that's high-end, and you know, I need to spend more. But my argument would be, in some of these cases, you'll end up with high-end client with high-end needs that come at a higher premium price. So your revenue goes up. So everything should still fall in line with that desired target of 6 to 8%. And then you have your other things like payroll and marketing and facility and so forth. So some guidance here on the percentages you would want to aspire to remain lean. And so before I move to the next slide, I want to just say, if you think about it, if you're $1 million practice, or say $500,000 practice, and you shave off 1%, think about it. If you do the math, what that really could mean. Some smaller steps could really result in great annual savings or cost avoidance in some cases, that really are valuable to the practice. So let's talk about some of these challenges that are out there. So establishing parameters, process, controls. So it really starts at the top, at the dental practice. You know, like any corporation, the CEO often has the vision, and then it trickles down, and you know, that becomes culture. And so establishing the parameters, process, and controls, you really want to make sure that you have the right people around you to embrace and understand. And part of that process is educating and guiding your staff to work closely and embrace the process and follow that through consistently. So I'll talk about consistency in a bit as well. Staff management of the goals, time and resources. So, you know, sometimes it's an additional responsibility. There is no procurement specialist generally in a dental practice. You have your office management staff who's often designated to be the procurement person. So you might have that person designated to sit down each week or at a certain frequency each month to place the orders. Where those orders go, what products are bought is a big question, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Getting better pricing and controlling spend. So where do you go? So that is a really big challenge especially for the independent dentist. Getting better pricing. Is it the right thing to shop around? Should you look one day at Amazon, one day at Shine, one day at Darby, one day Patterson, Benko? Like, it could really become daunting, dizzying, overwhelming, and it's not consistent. And there's really nothing negotiated. It's really just about price shopping. So if that's the case, and that's what a dental practice is doing, oftentimes there are better solutions out there when it comes to pricing. And then it talks about, it speaks to spend, and the time that you take to spend and the time it takes to do other things in the practice. Where's the bandwidth going, and where's the allocation of time and resources, and what's happening with patient care, and how is that being affected, or patients in the waiting room. Negotiating skills. So folks like me who, I don't know, I've chosen what some consider a boring career. And so I negotiate with folks like Jim or Dan over at Darby. CareStack and Darby happen to be partners of where I am. I'm at Synergy Dental Partners, and the largest and longest running GPO in the dental space. Day in and day out, I'm negotiating on behalf of our members. So negotiating skills, whether it's where I am at Synergy or what I've done in the hospital environment, or what we do as consumers in our everyday lives. Life is always a negotiation, but negotiating skills in understanding what the market bears for the price of a product, what the current environment dictates. We're all in the land of inflation right now. So prices are changing, having to stay on top of what's reasonable and what's not. And then that comparative analysis, that's very different than shopping. So comparative analyses and compiling data and information, you think about that and you think about, well, so what does a dental practice do? They're taking care of patients and it's oral health care. How much of that can they really devote to negotiating? And the people in the practice, you're not normally hiring your staff to have great negotiating skills. It just doesn't work that way. Driving compliance. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools. And when we talk about compliance is everything around a process and a protocol in a dental practice. Do you have a budget? Do you have spend management protocols? Do you have a formulary? Do you have the right suppliers? The right product suite for standardization in your practice? All those things that I'm talking about and more contribute to efficiencies and cost control. So then it's a matter of driving the compliance around that. There's a big difference between understanding something and embracing it maybe for a minute and then letting it go, or completely embracing it, and that's part of your culture and how you operate your practice ongoing. Supplier management, I talked about shopping. It's really not the way to go. Once you secure a relationship with a supplier or a program, whether it's through a GPO or you're directly working with a suite of suppliers, you want to keep it narrow enough that it's manageable, that it allows for standardization, not so wide that it's diluting your buying power and eroding your processes. And again, back to narrow. If it's too narrow, then you've got to be careful. You've got to find the sweet spot. Too narrow, then you're constraining your options. You don't want that. So then, when you have those relationships, the matter of the challenge, the title of this slide, the matter of managing the suppliers. So maintaining those relationships and having a frequency of contact and business review, data review, opportunity to do better collaboratively. That's very different than a supplier walking into your practice and saying, hey, let me look at what you need and let me place the order for you. that kind of is, to me, as a procurement person, is dangerous territory when you invite that kind of scenario. Navigating proposals and bids. So when you talk about a proposal, and a proposal is a more, robust, formalized version of a bid. A bid is kind of, shopping around your invoice and getting quotes on it and compiling that information. Proposals are more around request for proposal, or RFP, that a lot of folks have heard that acronym out there. And, to put those together and to capture all of the important points, returns, shipping, warranties, all the things that you want to understand from a supplier, so that you don't fall down into the rabbit hole of kind of, I call it gotcha, where you think you're getting a best price on something, but on the back end, something else is being charged. And so you're not winning. Really paying attention to those things and understanding how they work is a challenge for anybody, but in a dental practice for sure. And then who to partner with. So, making that decision. The dental industry is very small. So a lot of folks out there will, vacillate between the big three, Patterson and Banco and Shine. And then you have Darby and Burkhart, and you have some others out there. And then you get into these other, these smaller ones, and they all have their value, but what is the value? And how does the value change from that supplier's view of this dentist to this dentist to that dentist, versus maybe, I'll toot my horn here, as I happen to work for a GPO. I'll tell you, GPOs, they standardize the relationship, so the relationship is the same for all of the members, and the buying power is aggregated to get the lowest price for the member in the GPO. That's just one example. So let's talk about strategies. So controlling the supply spend. So this is interesting. The strategies can become challenges as well. So again, thinking about how a dental practice might want to seek help, whether it's, through consulting services or GPOs, or, something outside of the dental practice that goes beyond the staff, looking at what can be done to have an effective program on spend management and control. Some of these things are really tied together. If you're getting a great price on a product, but you have no budget, then you're just, not having any guidelines on staying within the budget, and you've got a great price, but you're buying a whole lot of product. And then you get into, over inventory and expiration. So there's, a connection and a trickle down effect to some of these things. If you have a great pricing, you want to have a budget. Then you want to get into things like product standardization. So talking about the budget, when you look at the industry averages and where you fit, I showed some of those benchmarks on an earlier slide. And so you really want to understand what is appropriate for your dental practice, and where do you fit? Do you want to fit where the average dental practice is in the industry, which is, from all the indexes out there showing where it's, there's healthy or health or something to be concerned with? Or is there something going on in your practice where you might want to have a budget that aspires to those standards that are reported in the industry, and maybe some exception? That's okay as long as you're controlling it. So product standardization is interesting as well. So when we talk about formularies, I've had some folks, and I'm just going to define it a little bit. Some people may know, some people may not. I've had some folks ask me, well, can you tell me, what is a formulary in the dental world? I know a formulary when I go to Walgreens and I'm getting the generic, it's on the formulary for the insurance company. I'm getting the generic drug instead of the name brand, and I'm saving a ton of money. It's a little bit different. In theory, the formulary for a dental practice is a suite of products, a list of products that have been determined based on a number of impactors and influences to arrive at that list. Generally, commonly ordered items at deep discounts. So say you're working with Darby Dental, you could have access to all of their products and great discounts, but to have a formulary as a subset of those items that you aspire to work within helps you with guidelines and standardization for your dental practice, so that you have, especially for the clinicians, you have a suite of product that everybody knows about the product, how it works, what the indications are, and so forth. And then tied to that is aggressive pricing. So that's the formulary, and that's kind of like, I call it the Bible of the dental practice, that everybody wants to aspire to use first. And then when you exhaust the formulary and you need to look outside of that for whatever reason, then you do so, but you want to have high formulary compliance. And a reason to go outside of the formulary, somebody would ask me, well, why would I go outside the formulary? Well, again, the formulary is a commonly ordered item. So, you got your gloves and your PPE and your, ClinPro, whatever it might be, but there might be something that's a special need, and you'll go outside the formulary, and it has no justification to be on the formulary because it's a one-off and it's something you're going to order that doesn't have the deeply negotiated volume pricing for the item to sit on the formulary. And then it also helps you, like I said, set clinical use guidelines, reduce the number of products and suppliers, and control maverick spend, saying, well, I think today I'm going to get it from Henry Schein, and tomorrow I'm going to get it from Patterson or Darby or Benco. You want to work out the right protocol for your relationship, and not go outside of that, because then you're touching relationships that are not negotiated, and so forth. Managing your inventory. So consolidating your orders. It's interesting. I went to a dental practice once, and there are technologies that are out there that are great. Synergy happens to be partnered with Method USA, which is an e-procurement solution, and it works very well, and it helps manage inventory, and it's an ordering platform, and has a lot of analytics and intuition built into it. But some dental practices also need a little help, and some of them don't have technology to support inventory management. So I go into a dental practice one day, and I open up the closet, and they have just stuff all over the place. And I said, well, I'm asking questions, and I'm finding out about their order frequency, and it's all over, it's whenever. And it's onesie twosies. So their prices are going up because they're ordering one of these, two of these, three of these, and they're getting all these shipping costs and so forth. So I said, well, why don't you just make a spreadsheet with some lines on it, laminate it, get a dry erase marker, put it on the inside of the closet door, and each week you put the beginning of the week, and each week as the staff is removing product, you start to mark on the sheet what you think you're going to need for the next order, whether it's once a week that you order, or 2 times a month, or what have you. You don't want to start ordering more than that. You pull it off the door, you go to the computer, you order your stuff, and then you wipe it off, you put the next week on, and there was like a magic moment for them. I said, wow, so the dry erase marker, a piece of paper, and some lamination, but sticking to the process. And
it's like the abacus, right? Some people prefer the calculator.
Right. So it's funny though, because I learned this in my medical days with nurses. It's very hard to tell a nurse or a hygienist or any clinician in a dental practice or a hospital to not grab and go. If you have an emergency need for a patient, that's number one. The thing is to be mindful of, if you've grabbed and gone, to come back and just make the note, right? Otherwise, in most cases where there's not an emergency need, pause for a moment and do it. It's the easiest thing, and to stick to that. I've had lots of consultants work in companies I've worked in, and they come in with great protocols and everybody's high-fiving, and this is beautiful and wonderful. The consultant leaves and everything goes back to the way it was. And the consultant gets to make the money, and that's the end of that. So, and so managing the inventory, has a trickle-down effect as well. It helps reduce overstock and hoarding. On that list that I mentioned, or in your e-technology or e-procurement system, when you want to put your inventory stock levels, that very often have reminders to tell you when it's time to buy more. You establish the right number that works for you to help avoid overstock and hoarding, which then brings you into dangerous territory with expirations and so forth. And I put a little note in there in that bullet at the end on the third bullet, FIFO. And then I'm not sure if everybody knows what that means, but it's the old adage, FIFO, first in, first out. And so back to procurement schooling, when you get your supplies, just like when you get your yogurt in your refrigerator and you have a few extra from the last time, you want to put the new ones with the date, unless you bought new ones that are going to expire, then you're not shopping right. You put the newer expiration dates behind the older, so you're using the older first, and you're mitigating the risk of expirations, and you constantly rotating your inventory instead of just putting stuff in the front, and those last couple of, I say Clin Pro, I keep going back to, or what have you, sits in the back, and then one day, oh boy, expired and possibly, you know, danger to the patient. Increasing your spending power, you know, the best pricing, leverage volume through third-party relationships. That's always an option. As I said, Synergy Dental Partners is the longest running, largest GPO out there. There are a handful, and I'd suggest it's worth exploring. And managing your suppliers, you know, you don't want them to manage you. You want to review your invoices, your shipping, any ancillary fees. I talk about creep, cost creep. Some suppliers out there, the ones that I work with are honest. The ones that spoke today are honest and above board suppliers, Darby and CareStack. And I like to say that most are, but there are some out there that you've got to always be watching. And if you always have to be watching them, you know, you've got to be careful. You got to think about who am I partnered with here? Talk about cost creep. They might give you a great price on the you know, the top 10 items that you buy, and then all the other items have really high price. Or they might give you a great price overall, and then a couple of months later, your prices start incrementally going up. And different from economic impactors, there's a difference there, and that's time for a conversation and maybe determining that you're not with the right supplier. So you got to always keep your eye on that kind of thing. Incorporating fiscal responsibility into employee training. So one thing that I've always explained to people that I've worked with is, you know, in a dental practice, you have a great team right there, but people come and go. And if you're lucky, you have great people that stay for a long time. But people have lives, you know, they might be going to school, they might just move, you know, to a different geography or what have you. And then everything that they've learned that I'm talking about goes out the door unless it becomes part of the onboarding process. And also there's, you know, I didn't put it here, but cross-training is important. So say one of your staff who's responsible for a big part of your spend management program is out for 2 weeks, or, you know, God forbid, has an illness. Well, who's going to pick it up and who understands how to run it? So there should be cross training. So no one person knows it all, and it, you know, it sits with them. But part of the onboarding also, when you have employee turnover, part of their orientation package should be the strategies around controlling spend for the dental practice. And then, of course, you know, tracking that, making sure that everybody is complying with the program. And I talk about incentives here as well. So, you know, you can get into incentives, you can get creative with it. You could have contests and see who could really get the best strategy going, the best deal in place. And, you know, there's a benefit to that for the employee. You know, maybe there's, you know, a dinner or a, you know, a Visa gift card or something like that. People who work hard and are going the extra mile for some of these strategies that are, you know, have a level of complexity to them. Maybe think about incentives. Last bullet on this slide, getting the right person. So, you know, we all know the adage, do you have the right person on the bus, and when they're on the bus, are they in the right seat? So making sure that you have somebody who is understanding of spend management and the controls we're talking about here, somebody who can contribute to standardizing the processes, understands concepts of time management and allocating the appropriate amount of time. And again, you consider incentives for folks who are really stepping up and doing, above and beyond.
So Jim, real quick, let me report on the poll as closed.
Oh, yes.
It's 70% responded that yes, they do have strategies in place to control spend and utilization, and about 30% of the audience does not.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear. So what do we do about it? So implementing a spend management plan and processes. So, what can you do on your own versus partnering or complementing what you're doing in partnering with a solution provider, and some of the considerations here. So I said this a little earlier, I touched on beware of partial spend management strategies, and that is, for example, having great pricing, negotiating great pricing on a product, or even having great pricing from a partner like a GPO, and then having no budget or having no inventory management around that. You have a component of spend management control, but you're not taking advantage of the total picture, and one affects the other if the whole equation isn't put together. Aligning with the right suppliers, as I said, bid solicitation and proposal analysis. That's pretty heavy duty stuff to do, and just putting together the proposal. And I'll tell you that it's easy for someone to tell it through a proposal bid solicitation that you want to ask of suppliers. It's easy for them to tell whether you really know what you think or it reveals what you may not know through the complexity and the level of detail of the questions you're asking of the supplier. So you want to just make sure you're aligning with the right suppliers in that respect. I'm a huge proponent of sending proposals out to suppliers, deals on cocktail napkins or handshakes. I'm just leery of people come and go, people forget things, relationships change. You really want to make sure you have it buttoned up. Know your strengths and weaknesses and those of your staff. So, somebody in the staff might be really good at one thing and not so good at another. And so you've got the right people. You just got to make sure that they're all focusing on the right things. And this kind of work requires certain discipline and focus. Consistent management is key. So you can't just put the program in place and think it's going to run by itself. Just speaking from a GPO perspective, in doing deals with suppliers and getting the right suppliers in our network, there are some GPOs out there. It's interesting the feedback that I get from suppliers and what I've experienced as a customer of GPOs in my medical life, where I would buy from suppliers associated with the GPO. Now I'm on the GPO side, and folks just think you're going to just do a deal and it's just going to run by itself, and that the supplier thinks the GPO's got to do all the work, the GPO thinks the supplier has to do all the work, and nobody's thinking about the member, the dental practitioner or the staff in their practice, and the help that they need to run an effective supply and equipment program in their practice. Consistently managing it is important. You can't just do the deal and then just walk away. It's ongoing. Knowing the market well enough and knowing enough of what's happening in the industry, who the players are. There are a lot of new players in the dental space now. A lot of new technologies are coming out of the woodwork. Some seem so similar to others. Some seem so different. Who is the right one to really go with, and is it really meaningful? I had a chief clinical officer once say to me, I got all jazzed up about this new product, and I thought, all right, well, let's get this going. Let's make this available. And chief clinical officer said, Jim, do you really need the Cadillac when the Toyota is appropriate and adequate for our operations? And I thought, wow, that was really compelling. And it kind of just sat with me that in some cases, the biggest and the best, it also comes at a price point. And is it really what's needed in the practice? And I talk about that with formularies as well. Formularies are meant to be given a level of choice, generally a higher end and a more economical end of, say, a glove or something like that. That helps you have a level of control when you just rely on the formulary instead of being dizzied by all the different options that are out there. So DSOs. DSOs.
Hey, Jim, this is about your 5-minute warning, just a heads up so we can get some Q&A.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because a lot of people know about what DSOs are. So I'll touch on the high level things. DSOs, dental service organizations or dental support organizations, the definitions vacillate. Generally, there is no secret to prudent spend management. Independent practitioners are empowered with solutions. DSOs, what they generally do in this vein that I'm talking about is they have relationships with suppliers, manufacturers, equipment, supplies, and they will mandate for the dental practices that they either partner with or own, and they'll mandate the use. This is what you got to use. You might have a dental practitioner who'll say, I really don't like that product. I really don't want to use it. But, not to disparage DSOs, they're successful business models, but this is just how they operate, and they have a level of mandate and regulations for the practices. They require the use of their contracts, and they install the metrics, and they're measuring you. So it's valuable, it has a little bit less flexibility. Wanted to give some perspective on that. When I talk about flexibility, that is in freedom of choice. GPOs and DSOs. So as I defined DSOs, their general mindset is at the top, and the ivory tower of the corporation is, there's a lot of financial metrics around that. And then GPOs, what they do is there is no mandate. So it's a compelling, the pressure's on the GPO to come up with a compelling solution for the dental practice to want to comply, which pretty much equates to almost like a mandate, because they're using all the things because they're the right solutions and products for the dental practice. And a good GPO offers a level of choice for the dentist, not so wide that they're diluting the buying power with 10 different categories of gloves, but not so narrow that it's not allowing freedom of choice with maybe one choice. So that's the main difference. GPOs preserve the independent practice bottom line, and small DSOs as well. That small DSOs don't have the size to have that negotiating power with suppliers. So that's where GPO can step in and help as well. The value proposition for the GPO is that, first of all, that they're not all the same. So just know that some are good at what they do, some don't have great supplier mixes or breadth of offering, maybe not the best pricing, or their member services don't provide enough touch to the member to help the member with what they need. But generally what the GPO does is negotiate the contracts, they hold the contracts, they get the special offers and the deals, they create the formularies. All these things allow for the dental practice to focus on their business. And so, I speak selfishly because I work for a GPO, but I just know the value being a customer of one, good ones and bad ones, and now working for one, driving supplier relationships. And the risks and rewards, I'll be real quick, Jim. I'll just say.
No, please. Yeah, I think this is important. And we've got a couple minutes. Go for it. It's fine.
Thanks. So there are some risks and rewards. Some of them I've touched on. Big one, big risk is doing all this work and then just becoming complacent and not paying attention to the overhead financials on all levels. Consistency ties to complacency. So you always want to be paying attention, and you always want to be consistent and not lose traction on the plans that you have implemented. Having metrics. So you might have this great plan, and then you're not looking at the outcomes. You want to look at the data to make sure, am I on point? Am I doing the right thing? Am I buying enough? Am I buying too much? Am I spending too much? So forth. Having a focused approach, constant attention, oversight, maybe having someone who really is not as skilled in your practice, working on all of these things that I've talked about, or maybe needs some guidance and training to get their skill up. I'm a big fan of the feeling that everybody is teachable, or just simply not knowing what to do and getting paralyzed and then just kind of throwing the hands in the air. The reward, there are so many rewards, right? Cost control, low overhead, less suppliers to manage without compromising the business. Standardization, especially standardization speaks financially, but for clinical operations, it's so valuable. I know especially from my hygiene professional friends. Liability mitigation, of course, you want to make sure you've got the right products. You're not buying gray market or anything like that, or expirations. And then efficiencies, process, staff, you can focus on other things, patient experience, everybody's happier, it's all working well. All right, so we're at the Q&A section, and I know that Jim has been compiling things I'm going to solicit at this point. And I also wanted to give everybody my contact information. If anybody has questions about this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me if you have an afterthought from this Q&A. And check out Synergy Dental Partners if you're interested in understanding some of what I've talked about with what a GPO is. We're so proud of our company and what we do, so I speak very sincerely about that. So, Jim, question?
Yeah, we have a couple questions, and I want to encourage. Thank you so much. So many insights here. We've got a couple questions in the parking lot. I'm going to go through these, but I want to encourage our audience. We have a few minutes here intentionally built into the program before we give out the CE codes. If you have questions, this is the time to raise them, and you want to use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. So the first one, Jim, from Sarah in the audience is you talked earlier about maybe there's an opportunity or example to move off of your internal formulary, for a kind of an atypical investment. Could you share like a real world example from your experience of what that might look like, for independent practice? I don't know if you have any, kind of the parameters for that and situations where you've seen that more often.
Sure.
Frequently, I guess.
So the question is for a dental practice to maybe change from what they're currently doing with what they consider their formulary?
No, like a one-off. You mentioned that you want to try to stay true to if you create a formulary to manage products, you said there's situations where you might go off of that for a special type of investment. I don't know if you could give a real world example in dentistry of what that might look like.
Sure. So say maybe you have I'm speaking as a non-clinician here, but I'll try to be as effective in the illustration. Say you have something that's on formulary that maybe the patient has, this specific patient might have an allergy to, or you have a special need in one of your cases that the formulary, as it's meant to capture the most commonly ordered items, there's something that's off the formulary that might be a different kind of mouthwash or a different kind of glove if the patient is expressing that they're sensitive to the gloves that you use. And I'm not talking latex. I mean, that's pretty much been removed these days, but a certain kind of vinyl, or you've got to go to nitrile or something like that. Something that might not sit on the formulary that you've got to get because it's specific for that patient need. That's that type of patient, and they're always going to need it, or a case presents itself with a unique product need that is not so common.
Appreciate that. This came from our Joe, who's in attendance tonight. If you could say there's one thing that a practice could implement tomorrow, and that's actionable right away, like what would be your number one suggestion for somebody who doesn't have, this person mentioned that they don't really, their spend is not in that desirable range, but like what would be that one thing that you'd recommend or suggest?
Okay, so two things that are the big easy lifts that have value. The first thing is back to the formulary. Formulary is just such a powerful thing. I call it, my Bible. That in arriving at your items that you buy most frequently and approaching your supplier, or if you're working with a GPO, understanding the products that you buy most frequently as it compares to the formulary offered by that GPO, considering to make a switch to that formulary, or looking at what you can do to negotiate lower prices based on your high volume items. There's always room for that. If you haven't done it, there is always room for that negotiation to begin. And then the second thing is the inventory management. Putting, like I described, the sheet of paper with the lamination, and having a count of what you want on your shelf, no more, particularly no more, but no less as well. So you might compromise patient care by having less than what you need in time to get, when you place the order. Inventory management, so you're running lean, appropriately lean, and you've got your formulary with your most cost-effective products on it. The rest of it, building budgets and other things around that, all support that, but those are two core things that could be done very quickly.
Excellent. Okay, and then this is the last question I have tabled here. Is this is interesting. Stacy brings this up about how during the pandemic, her practice was conditioned. Hey, there's extra lead time is needed. You need to order more. You need to have more on the shelf. And Stacy would like your perspective on like where do we stand now in terms of where do you find suppliers are in your vast experience with is it still just in time? Should we order and have higher? I know it's a general thing, but
Yeah.
She wanted to gauge your expertise on, or do you feel like the supply chain is starting to kind of catch up, and they can maybe live on the edge a little bit more, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I love that question because I lived it. We all lived it, right? So the short answer is, and I'll elaborate. The short answer is the supply chain has eased up. You read about right now supply chain issues, but it has eased up in the medical supply and which transcends to dental, especially PPE, has eased up. The global production has caught up quite a bit with the understanding with the constraints the pandemic has presented for us. And additionally, for example, you talk about 3M. In the beginning of the pandemic, 3M would only release PPE, N95s to the medical community. The dental community had no access to that. That's changed now, so that's opened up as well. So my recommendation is think lean with your inventory, but work with your supplier in understanding where they currently have a trend still weekly, monthly on their stock out items. They owe that to you to tell you we're challenged still with this suite of items, and you navigate that as time goes by. But short answer is it has eased up considerably, and especially PPE is much more prevalently available. My own dentist in the beginning looked like a robot. I said, "Where did you get all this PPE? What are you wearing?" Whatever we could from anywhere. I thought, what danger am I in? It was crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. So thank you for so many great insights. If you want to reach out to Jim, email him, text him at this information here. Someone asked about, can they have his deck? This is his intellectual property. You email him. And all I can tell you is that we want you to be here for the duration of the program. It's really important, you get the full information. If you want to reach out to Jim and to have a dialogue about some of his, other pearls of wisdom, please do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Jim. Go ahead as I share my
I just
screen
want
here.
to thank everybody for participating, and I hope you all found some value out of this.
I did. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I feel dangerous enough now. Like that old Holiday Inn Express ad, right?
Well, I'm a New Yorker and I talk fast, and I was watching the clock and I still got dinged. So, okay.
That's okay. If you want to learn about our future upcoming programs, do us a favor, join the CareStack Champions group on Facebook. That's where we advertise our upcoming courses. No one wants to get another email, right, and be added to another list. We also do promote them through CE Zoom, through the newsletter. But join the CareStack Champions group, and that way you can opt in and get that information when it's appropriate to you. So, Jim, on behalf of both Darby and CareStack, thank you for a tremendous program. So many actionable insights for our audience tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate the forum, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.
See ya.